Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Got a new Cardfight Vanguard video for you guys today. So it's that time of the week. We got a new episode last night. We're covering it today. We got to see a lot of new cards for Alden. I'm a little butthurt we didn't get more for Zorga. We only got one new card, but we're still going to cover the episode. This is Season 2, Episode 4. If you guys enjoy this kind of content, drop a like on the video. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Let's jump in and check it out. The episode kicks off with a lot of Jinky. We see Jinky kind of arriving at an airport, and he's talking to his phone. And then we get to see what he's talking to on his phone. Turns out he's talking to Gui. Gui was the AI that was kind of the main antagonist of the Will Dress series, and he basically tried to superimpose super strict rules on how people should be playing for the Uniforce program. Got people obsessed with winning, and it just took a lot of freedom out of the game until Yu came and ended up winning. But they're having a conversation back and forth. We end up going to Jinky in his office, and he kind of nods off. And when he wakes up, he's on card. We kind of see he meets Alden, and they kind of touch hands, kind of like what happened with Akina and Raziel. And he wakes up and he has the Destin 1 card, the Destin 1 Protection Alden. And then he looks up, and Sybil's sitting, on a couch. Kind of calls him. He looks up. Bam, there's Sybil. Sybil tries to use its mind control powers on him, amplify his desires type thing. Free Jinky's mind, as she puts it. But then it cuts to the theme song. It comes back and it shows us a little clip of Akina. We see Akina making breakfast for himself and Akari. He makes her favorite, because she loves stew, so he makes stew for her. And she kind of ignores him. And then she tells him, "Don't go out of your way for me." And he's just like, "Hey, whatever's wrong, let me know and I'll do my best to help." And she spazzes. She doesn't want him to keep being so self-sacrificing. We got a short conversation with Jinky and Masanori. We see Jinky kind of show up at some ruins, and Gui's on his phone talking about that there was a giant energy surge here. Turns out Masanori was following him. They have some back and forth. They talk a little bit about Jinky's brother, and Gui ends up explaining that where the fated clash happened, there was a huge energy spike of some sort of unknown power. We know it's the design force, and that if more of this energy gathers, they don't know what's going to happen since this energy is beyond human comprehension. And there's going to be so much of it because of the Destin Showdown. And Masanori mentions that he doesn't like Sybil. He doesn't trust her because he thinks she's going to, if she wins, she's going to wipe out humanity. But they end up finishing their conversation, basically said, "Let's go fight." We fast forward a little bit to their actual fight that night, and the fight starts. We get to see their starters. Masanori's playing Disastrous Slurper, the same starter he had last season. Jinky's got a new one, Knight of Heavenly Expression Admis. Masanori gets the first turn. Masanori rides Abyss Fishing. Turn ends. Turn 2, Jinky rides Knight of Heavenly Sao Tranquilia. I hope. Some of his names are weird, so bear with me here. Real quick, forgot to mention, for anybody that hasn't seen my other episode reviews, they don't cover... It's part of the rules to draw at the beginning of your turn and to energy charge 3. They don't do that at all through the entire game. But obviously they're getting more cards to hand, they're using energy blast effects, so just assume that every turn they draw for turn and that they energy blast. I did my best to reverse engineer these card effects and majority of their costs, but unfortunately if the card has an energy cost, I don't know, because we never get to see their energy through the entire game. It was really annoying, but I did the best I could. So hopefully I nailed them. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Turn 2, Jinky rides Knight of Heavenly Sao Tranquilia, uses Admis' skill, gets to draw his extra card, attacks Masanori. Masanori doesn't guard, Masanori takes a damage. Jinky ends his turn, damages 1-0 with Jinky. Turn 3, Masanori rides Slit the Preordained. Masanori uses the skill of Abyss Fishing. Abyss Fishing skill is auto when this unit is rolled upon by Split the Preordained. Soul Blast 1, look at the top 7 cards of the deck, choose 1 unit and 1 normal order from among them, add the normal order to hand, and send the unit to the drop. So we don't get to see the card he sends to the drop. He doesn't even announce it. As far as cards that he added to hand, he adds Sweets that become an evil dream. Masanori calls Conceited Noble Philander and uses its skill. When Philander is played from hand, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose any card, put it in the drop. He ends up putting you Wandering Spirits in the drop for later. Masanori then plays Sweets that become an evil dream. For anybody that doesn't know what Sweets that become an evil dream does, You play it for a counterblast 1. You draw a card, then you get to look at the top card of your deck. You can put it back on top of your deck or discard it. Now, because he played an order, he activates the skill of a roaming prison dragon that was in his drop zone. I'm assuming that's the card he dumped off the top 7. When you play a normal order, you can call this card to rearguard. If you call this card to rearguard, you get to activate one of 2 skills. If you use an Alchemagic, which is, the main mechanic of his deck, you get to do both, but this turn he only gets 1. You can either give it 10,000 power or you can give it +1 critical. So he calls Roaming Prison Dragon from the drop, gives it plus 10,000 power. This is where we get to see the new card for Zorga. We don't get to see its skill this turn. He uses it on the following turn. But it's called Sea Scissors of Deep Hades. He calls it behind his Vanguard. He goes into his battle phase. He attacks with Philander. Jinky guards. He attacks with his Vanguard. Jinky doesn't guard. Masanori doesn't get a trigger. Jinky takes 1 damage. And then he attacks with Roaming Prison Dragon. Jinky guards this. Turns over. The damage is now 1-1. It's even. Now we go into Jinky's turn. Jinky rides Knight of Everlasting Sky Sudios. Again, new card. I'm assuming this one's going to be an energy blast to use the skill for the grade 1 in the ride line. But he gets to check top 5 and he adds a grade 2 to him. He adds a new card called Galmelt. He then calls Knight of Rendering Flash. Caraber uses its skill. This is an older card. Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1. Look at the top 3 cards of the deck. Choose a card from among them. Reveal it. And call it to rearguard if it's a grade 2 or lower unit. And put it to your hand if it's not. He ends up calling Wafting Owl behind the Vanguard off the skill. And then he calls the Galmelt he just added to his hand. He goes into his battle phase. He attacks with Caraber. Masanori guards it. He attacks with his Vanguard. Masanori doesn't guard. Again, he gets no trigger. Masanori takes a damage. He then attacks with the Galmelt. Masanori guards this one. Now the damage is 2-1. Jinky's back in the lead. Now we get a little bit of back and forth. There was actually a little something last turn. We get a little bit of back and forth. Masanori ends up talking about Jinky's brother. It turns out that he knew Jinky's brother really well. They used to play a lot. And he talked about how excited they used to get playing each other. And that he's one of the few people that he could really take seriously. And that their record was always back and forth. But the last time they played, Shingi won. And Masanori never got to get his get back because he died. So he's saying he's just going to have to take it out on his little brother. Masanori then rides the Faded One of Taboo, Zorga, Nadir. He uses the skill of Split the Preordained. When this unit is rode upon by Zorga with a Divine skill, choose up to 1 normal unit from your drop, add it to hand. He adds back the Sweets That Become an Evil Dream that he played last turn. Now we get to see the skill of Sea Scissors of Deep Hades. You retire 2 rear guards and add a normal order from your drop to your hand. He retires the Philander and the Roaming Prison Dragon. It's actually a really, really boss setup card because a lot of the times you're just going to call the cards back out. You'll see what I mean in a second. But he retires the 2 of them and he adds Gather Upon Me, You Wandering Souls back to his hand. He uses Zorga's first skill. Zorga's first skill is Act Vanguard once per turn. Energy Blast 2, bind a normal unit from your drop. Choose 2 cards from your drop, call them to rear guards. And they get 5,000 power for every order you have bound with a different name. He only has 1 order bound at this time, so they both gain 5k. And then at the end of the turn, you retire both of the cards that you called. He calls out 2 copies of Philander, gives them both 5k. Then he uses Zorga's second skill, which is his Alchemagic skill. The way Alchemagic works, for anybody that doesn't know, when you play an order, normally that's all you get. Alchemagic allows you, in this case, allows you to choose a bound order and basically attach it to the order that you're playing. You pay both costs, you get both effects in sequence. So he plays Gather Upon Me, You Wandering Souls, and Alchemagic's with Clutch of Grudge Toxin. So Wandering Souls, what it does is you play it by discarding an order, which he just added the sweets. You choose one of your Vanguards, gets +1 drive until the end of turn. Clutch of Grudge Toxin says you play this if you have a Zorga Vanguard with a Divine skill. Choose one of your Vanguards. It gets, when this unit attacks, retire a rear guard. Choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. And this unit getting 10,000 power. So he added the skill to his Vanguard, and he gave it +1 drive checks. Now, because he played an order, he activates Roaming Prison Dragon in his drop. He actually has 2 now. So Masanori gets to call both Roaming Prison Dragons, and because he Alchemages, they now both get both skills. So they both gain +10k, +1 critical. So Masanori goes to his battle phase. He attacks with his Roaming Prison Dragon. It's a pretty swole column. Jinky guards it. He attacks with the Vanguard. He uses Clutch of the Grudge Toxin skill, retires one of the Philanders because it's going to get retired anyway, and it's already done boosting. He gives his Vanguard 10k. He retires the Gale Melt. Jinky doesn't guard. On the triple drive, Masanori does get a critical. He gives the critical to his Vanguard, the power to his other roaming prison that hasn't attacked yet. So Jinky takes 2 damage. He attacks with the roaming prison dragon. Jinky guards this one. Now the damage is 2-3 with Masanori in the lead. But now we get some more, out of game talk, where we find out what Masanori thinks that Jinky's wish is to bring back his brother. And Jinky's like, that's not my wish, but I think that's your wish. That you want to bring him back, even if it means you have to do something taboo. This is kind of a funny joke that they made in the first season, because when it came to Masanori's wish, it was always super, not necessarily enigmatic, but they hinted at it, they never really full-on said it. But he said he wants to do something, full-blown taboo, even maybe bringing back the dead. So he jokes about it, but he never really says it. But it turns out he wants to bring back Shingi. So I thought that was cool that they, went back to what he was saying in the first season. Anyway, back to the game. Jinky rides Destined One of Protection Alden. He uses Suido's skill. This is where I start trying to mess with the cost of skills. And you guys we'll see it as we go through some of these screenshots. But he Soul Blasts 1, look at the top 5 cards of the deck, and calls 1. We don't actually see him do the Soul Blast, but I was counting the cards underneath his Vanguard Soul. He should have had 3 cards at the start of turn, 3 cards in his Soul at the start of turn, but he Soul Blasted last turn for Care Bear. So now he has 2. But now he uses this skill, gets the top 5, calls 1. He calls a card called, I'm gonna butcher this name too, Razaionel, and Razaionel on call lets you draw a card. So then he follows up with Alden's Divine skill. It's a Soul Blast 1, look at the top 7, call 2 units, and they cannot be retired to the end of the following turn. I know that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but there's more. He calls the grade 2 over a card that's already on the board. He calls Gale Melt, and he calls Clear Sky Dragon, Light Leads Dragon. He calls the Gale Melt over the Razaionel that he just played, but because he called it over that, it bounces back to his hand. That's part of the Divine skill. When he does this, he also activates Razaionel's skill, which, because he bounced it back to hand, he now gets to give the unit that was called over at plus 10,000 power. He now calls the Razaionel in front of the Light Leads Dragon, because the Light Leads Dragon can boost as long as you have an Alden on the board. He calls the Razaionel in front of it. Now he gets to use Razaionel's on play skill again, gets to draw another free card. He then calls a card whose name I can never pronounce. Fupuri. It's literally Ffpuri. He calls it behind the Gale Melt. All it does is when it boosts, if you're at grade 3, you get the Soul Charge 1. Anyway, he attacks with Razaionel, Masanori guards. He attacks with Gale Melt, Masanori doesn't guard, takes 1 damage. He attacks with Alden, and he uses its skill. All these cards have skills that you can use every turn. This is Alden's. It's Counterblast 1, you draw a card, you call a card from your hand. It cannot be retired until the end of the following turn. It gains 10k. And if you call it over another unit, that unit bounces back to your hand. So he bounces back the Razaionel again. And now because he bounced it back, Razaionel's skill goes off, giving his new rearguard an additional 10k power. And it's another Gale Melt. That actually ends up mattering after. Gale Melt has a skill when it's called during the battle phase, which allows him to restand the Gale Melt that already attacked. And I'm pretty sure this was another Soul Blast, because he Soul Charged when he swung with the first Gale Melt being boosted, and then when he called the second one, he stood again. So that was another Soul Blast. So this deck's going to be really, really Soul Blast heavy. Masanori doesn't guard the Vanguard. Jinky gets a front trigger. Masanori attacks with Gale Melt. Masanori guards. He attacks with another Gale Melt. Masanori guards. Turn ends. Damage is now 3-3, even. This is where stuff gets crazy. So Masanori Persona rides. He uses the skill of Deep Hades. He retires his 2 roaming prison dragons because he still has his 2 front rows. The Flanders were retired, obviously, at the end of last turn. And he adds an order to hand. I thought this was a little bit weak because he shows us him from behind, so we never get to see what the order he adds is. He uses Nadir's skill. Energy Blast 2, binds an order, calls 2 dudes from the drop. He calls 2 Philanders. They now gain 10k power because he has 2 orders bound. And he talks a little bit to Jinky. He's like, what order should I Alchemagic? And it turns out the Gale Melts, the new grade 2 that Jinky's playing, apparently because he has Alden, they can give themselves 20k shield when he intercepts with them. 20k shield a piece. That's like that. So he has 50k in shield just on his board, not to mention his hand. I thought that was a little bit crazy. I thought he meant like 20k in total. Like I thought they were 10ks a piece. Nah, you'll see why in a second. But Masanori decides to go full Unga Bunga and says, you know what, I'm just going to beat you with overwhelming power. So he plays Fill the Skies, O Branded of Corpses, and he Alchemagics with Clouded Miasma. So Branded of Corpses, what it does is you play it from your hand. So what it does is you play it if you have a Vanguard with Zorga and its card name and a Divine skill. You choose one of your Vanguards, and it gets, for the rest of the turn, it gets all of your rear guards that are placed from the drop get plus 5,000 power, even the ones that were already called. And then Miasma's effect is you play this with a Counterblast 1, you choose a grade 3 or less card from your drop, call it to rear guard. If this card was part of Alchemagic, your Vanguard now gains a continuous skill that your Pharaoh has plus 10k. So he calls another Deep Hades over his own Deep Hades. He's not going to call over the 2 big boosters that he now has. But now he gives both of those skills to the Vanguard. He uses Roaming Prison Dragon's skill, same as he did last turn. Calls it out, plus 10k, plus 1 critical. He moves to his battle phase, basically instantly, and uses the skill of Abomination of Impending Karma. It's basically a bigger Roaming Prison Dragon. What it does is auto drop at the beginning of your battle phase. If you have a Vanguard with Zorga and its card name and a Divine skill, and you did an Alchemagic this turn, you can call this card to the rear guard. If you call this card and your opponent's Vanguard is at grade 3 or greater, this unit gets plus 1 critical, and then it has another skill when placed. When this unit is placed on rear guard, Energy Blast 4, bind a normal order from your drop. This unit gets 5,000 power until the end of turn for each normal order with a different name in your bind zone. So now he has 3 rounds because he just bound a 3rd one to play this card. So it gains 15k, then it gains 5k because it was called from the drop, then it gains an additional 5k because it's in its front row. That's just off skills, not to mention how big the boosters are. So this turn's going to be pretty big for Masanori. Oh yeah, and he Persona Road. So yeah, that's another huge one. Masanori attacks with Impending Karma for a massive attack, 68 for 2. Jinky doesn't guard it, takes 2 damage. He does get a critical on the second check, so he does give his Vanguard 10k for the rest of the turn. Masanori then attacks with Zorga, and on swing he uses Zorga's Divine skill. So Zorga's Divine skill is when this unit attacks at grade 3 or greater, you can Soul Blast 1, choose a column and stand it. So he stands the impending column. Jinky guards us with shields. Masanori does get a critical, he gives it to the Roaming Prison Dragon, and now he swings to the Roaming Prison Dragon that's now 78,000 for 3. This is where we get to see what I was talking about with the shields. So he intercepts with the 2 Galmelts, each gaining 20k shield now, and then he guards with another card from hand that gains an additional 5k shield. So he guards with 16,000 in shield. And his Vanguard's already got plus 10k because of the trigger, so he's guards with 83,000. It was crazy. And then Masanori swings with his Impending Karma that he restood. That's now 78 for 2. And Jinky drops a perfect guard, leaving himself with 1 card in hand. Right before this next turn is the last turn, we finally get to find out what Jinky's wish is. Jinky's wish, it's his wish and Gui's wish. They're basically carrying on his brother's dream, and their wish is to protect the happiness of all card fighters. I know, super noble for someone that's supposed to be a bad guy. But he Persona rides, he actually top decks the Persona ride. He calls Razionel, the card that he saved last turn, uses its skill, draws an extra card. He moves Light Leads to the front row, and he calls Knight of Heavenly Hammer behind it. It's the critical trigger. He then attacks with Light Leads. Masanori doesn't guard. Masanori now goes to 4. After the attack, he uses Light Lead's second skill. Light Lead's second skill is auto rear guard. At the end of the battle, this unit attacked or boosted, put another rear guard with in the same column as this unit into the soul. Choose one of your units with Alden in its card name. It gets 10,000 power, so he gives Alden an additional 10,000 power and an additional soul. He then attacks with Razionel. Masanori doesn't guard. Masanori goes to 5. And then he attacks with Alden, and Masanori doesn't guard this one either. And now the damage is 6 to 5. Jinky wins. I kind of wish he had used more skills, because I was wondering what he was going to do. I assumed he was going to restand the rear guard, but what from there? Well, not restand the rear guard, but draw and then call it a new rear guard. But I wanted to see where the game was going to go from there. But it is what it is. After the match, Jinky offers to shake Masanori's hand, and Masanori kind of laughs about it. But then Masanori pulls him in. He's like, your mind's not being messed with at all, is it? And we find out what actually happened. When Sybil tried to use her powers on Jinky, Gui swapped consciousness with him. So we saw him do this in the Will Dress season, where basically he borrowed Jinky's body, and Jinky knew something was up, not Jinky, I'm sorry, Gui knew something was up, so he swapped the Jinky, and it turns out her power doesn't work on AIs. So Jinky's been straight the entire time, playing basically a double agent. He basically pretended to be mind polluted to find out what her goals were. And then after, you know, being part of them, he actually contacts Gabwelius and ends up giving information to Gabwelius and getting information from Gabwelius. And we find out a really, really interesting twist, that the trap that's basically gave her control of the design force that Gabwelius had gathered would have had to be planted before the Fated Clash ended, having the design force be there. So it turns out that Sybil was possessing somebody that was in the Fated Clash, and might still be doing that. We don't know. But I thought that was a really, really interesting twist that they threw in there, and that's actually how the episode ends. So we got to see a lot of new cards for Alden. I'm really excited to see what these cards are going to do once we actually get all of them announced on Tuesday. Keep an eye out. You guys know I'm going to stream. I'm going to mess with the deck. I want to take another look at Zorga Nadir. I still love that deck, and I really like that new card that they got, but I wish they got more than just one new card. Let me know how you guys felt about the episode down in the comments. Let me know how you guys are feeling about the Alden support. If you guys think, what you guys think about the skills that I might have gotten wrong. If you guys want to check me out on social media, those links are also down below. That's it from me. I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.